Okay, welcome CIS 5620, another session. Like I mentioned before, this will be on Blackboard. I'll post the video later on. We are in week what? Week 8, I think. So we're looking at the project cost management. I hope you went through the project time management, you watched the videos, and I did not get any questions. So I'm hoping that you guys are either not getting anything or you're getting it. And that's why you're not asking questions. Is one of those two, or maybe in between. So remember, we are here for you. Use the office hours. I should have office hours. Like yesterday, I logged in from 10 to I think 1. I'm teaching 3 classes. Nobody showed up from those 3 classes. So this is resources that you have paid for. If you don't use them, life goes on. And you need to realize that we actually do have some issues that we need to address in the society. And I'm going to give you a practical example. I spent like maybe an hour ago, I was trying to look for a urologist, that's a man doctor. And just for the sake of it, I was trying to see how many black doctors do we have who are urologists. And I went through a list of, there were what, 40 doctors in this location. So I just typed a zip code and gave me doctors who are urologists, and I didn't see even a single male or female African American. So, and that's the same thing that you might find if you're looking for a heart doctor, if you're looking for a surgeon. Sometimes you see those kind of data. So, in one way or another, we need to pull up our socks. Okay, so remember what I say is what we are doing is not only for ourselves, but hopefully for our siblings, for our family, and for our neighbors. Because if you understand some concept in a class that you're taking and somebody comes behind you or after you and they're taking that class, if you struggled in that class, they should not struggle as much as you. And that's what I tell students. If you're taking a calculus class and you're having a hard time in that class, you should put as much effort as possible so that you understand the concept. So in case somebody in your family is taking that class, they won't have to struggle as much as you're doing. And if you have a wife or you have a husband, you have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and they're taking a class and you've taken it before, if you can help them with the homework, then that means they'll finish their homework earlier and then you can have more time to spend together. Okay, so it's a win-win situation. So let's make sure that we are doing that. And like I mentioned before, sometimes the professors will give you a third. If they're trying very much, you have the two that to do. That's where you have the textbook, you have the resources on the internet, you have the office hours, and all that. So make use of all those resources. Okay, so going on, we have an assignment for this week. So I'll start with that and then we'll dig into the course material. So right here under the assessment, we're going to be working on the discussion board, and this week discussion board, like we said, from now onwards, you're going to be doing voice thread. So at least we have that interactivity. So the voice thread, the assignment for this week is asking you to give examples of typical sunk costs for a project, as well as examples from your personal life. So before the end of this class, we'll have covered what is a sunk cost, okay, so that you'll be able to exactly know what sunk cost means, and then you can give me some examples. Okay. And also, we are saying another part that you have to address in your discussion is why is it difficult for people to ignore them, that sunk cost, when they should. Okay. So sunk cost, like you're saying, is money that you have already invested in a project, and you realize that that project is not going to give you any value, and you just have to ignore that and move on. Okay. So usually people don't like letting go. Okay, it's the same concept. It's the same as you don't want to let go, and that is what we are asking you. Why is it so difficult for you to let go? So if somebody is in a relationship and they say this thing is not working, but they say, but I've invested so much in it, that is sunk cost. Whatever you've put in that relationship, if it's not working, you should move on. Why is it so difficult to move on from a relationship? So that's what we're saying, some things that you can give examples in your personal life. Okay. The same thing is in organization, like in the government. We see a lot of projects whereby people keep putting in more money on a project. It's kind of referred to beating a dead horse, for lack of a better word. Okay, so there's that guy in the Bible who is, what is Balaam? Anybody know about him?
His name was?
He's not Baram, or what is his name? The guy who was beating a horse actually died or something. Anyhow, so if you have an electronic Bible, you can Google and find the guy beating a horse. You might be able to come up with that information or his name, probably something like that. Anyhow, so that's the assignment for this week on the discussion board. We have the research paper coming up. I think it's going to be due next week. Is it? On Monday. So the course document right here. Let's check and see what it's telling us. Week 6, 7, 8, week 9, 10, 19. So week 9, 10, 19, that's next week. Submit research paper draft. So that's going to be in week 9. So when you go to weekly learning workload and you go to week 9, we're also going to have an exam next week, by the end of next week, and you go to assess. You'll see that we have the research paper, and also we are going to have our exam number 2. That's the end of next week. So exam number 2, that's on week 9 right here, and it's going to cover the chapters until this point. So it's going to cover, so next week is going to be a little bit busy because you're going to have to go through the quality management, and we have the exam, and that exam is going to cover project quality management, cost management, time management, and scope. So those are the 4 chapters that we have. It's going to have the same format as the previous exam. Any questions? Okay, I don't hear anything, so that means continue. Okay, so under the to-do list, I give you some suggestions here of the things that you're going to be working on in this chapter. So we're looking at to estimate the cost of the project and how to do the estimation, carry out what's called earned value analysis, and then you're going to be using the earned value method to do that. There are some computations that you have to do. Now, you don't have to worry about this because usually you have a formula of how to do this, and you're going to be given the values in most of the situations. If you ever take the PMP exam or the CM exam, you will be required to have the formulas for these values, and I'll show you where those formulas are, and then you're going to be able to look at some of the examples. So this earned value management concept is very important. You will find questions in the CAPM or even the PMP exam about how to use the earned value management. It is one of the most important concepts in project management because it helps you to be able to see whether your project is under the budget or is over the budget. So when somebody says that the project is delayed, these are some of the measures that you can actually use to help you and explain that there is a problem in your project. And then it shows you exactly where the problem is, and hopefully be able to come up with corrective measures. So in the appendix, you might be coming through a concept that's called crashing project. And basically what they're trying to do is they have computed the values and found out that the project is delayed or the project is over the budget, is using too much money than it was budgeted. And what they're trying to do is try to see whether they can reduce the duration of the project. So earned value management, or EVM, is a very important concept. And if you understand it, then you're going to be on the right path. So far, so good?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Okay, so under the LAN, when you click on the LAN, we have a couple of videos here, and I don't know whether some of this, I'm hoping that they're still active. So these videos are actually talking about the same concept, but sometimes we say repetition is good. So we talk about the techniques of estimating the cost, and we explain a little bit about what cost is. We are saying is a resource that has been sacrificed or foregone to achieve a specific objective or something given up in exchange. That's what we call the cost. You go to a restaurant, you want some food, you have to pay. Okay, you go get a massage. There's a service, you have to pay for it. You go to a store, you buy a pair of shoes, you have to give up something. So that's the cost. Usually cost is represented using monetary values. In the US, we use the dollars. If you go to Europe, they use what? Pounds or euros. If you go to China, yen, and on and on and on like that. So we have the project cost management, which includes all the processes required to ensure that the project is completed within an approved what? Budget. So this is a process. You have to go through cost management. You have to determine the cost of the project and then see how long it's going to take and on like that. We'll go through that in a few minutes. Cost overrun. So this video actually gives you information about all these different concepts. Okay, so it tells you what is cost overrun and then talks about the different types of cost. Tangible, something that you can touch, what you're calling tangible cost. Or benefits, those costs or benefits that an organization can easily measure in dollars. Okay, so if you are Apple and you produce an iPhone, that's a tangible, and the cost involved in producing that iPhone is going to be part of what you're calling tangible cost. There are going to be some other that you cannot measure. Intangible are things that you cannot easily measure, okay, using monetary terms. Now, sometimes if you look at a company's budget, you also will see tangible asset and intangible asset. Okay, so employees, you don't see like the value of the employees in a balance sheet because that's part of what you're calling intangible asset. And the skills of those employees is part of what you're calling intangible asset. You cannot put a value to it. Now, some of the companies actually have come up with a concept of valuing that concept, and they call that goodwill. Okay, that relationship that you have established, also either because of your good employees, because of the relationship that you have with your customers, there's a way you can put a value to it, and that's what is called goodwill. Direct cost associated directly with producing a product or service. Then you have indirect. So indirect is like if you have a company that is in the manufacturing, they have to pay their secretaries, they have to pay for water in the bathroom and things like that. That's part of what you're calling indirect cost. They are costs that are not directly related to producing of the goods or services, but they help at the end. They are support. And then, of course, we talk about the sunk cost, money that has been spent in the past when deciding project to invest or continue. It should not include the sunk cost. Okay, so that's money that you have already spent, and if you're deciding whether to end the project, you don't include that. So this video helps you to understand this concept much more clearer. Here, this video helps you to see how you can estimate the cost of a project. So it walks you through the different policies, procedures, and documentation that will be required when you're doing the plan, executing and controlling the project, which are part of the project cost management. Companies have policies, like we'll see in a few minutes. When you come up with the budget, there's what you're going to be calling contingency cost. Contingency means those expenses or some money that is set aside cater for things that are unknown. Okay, like most of the companies, they never knew that we're going to have COVID. It was going to have such an impact. So there are some companies that were working on project and they had set some money aside. So some of that money was used to try and alleviate some of the difficulties that were brought about by the COVID. Some companies work on projects that are in a region that has like a lot of hurricanes, so they have to put some money. Now, sometimes you can have a hurricane, sometimes you cannot have a hurricane, but in case it happens, you have that. Companies have to set some money in case some of their top working employees want to leave. So if an employee wants to leave, as a project manager, is two things you can do. You can let them go, or you can tell them, I'm going to do what? Match your offer from the other company, or even give them something more. So usually if that employee is making such a move in the 6th month of a 12-month project, you probably had not planned for that technically, but because you have the contingency cost, that money that is set aside for eventualities, you can use that money for that. So we call that contingency, and that's part of the company's policies. And how do you go about ensuring that? That's the procedures, and then how do you have to document that? Okay, so how do you determine the budget cost estimate? You use the work breakdown structure, the items. Remember the work items that you talked about, the individual work items? Use those ones to help you with budgeting. And then how do you control the cost? So the CPIs, this and value management is one of the tools that you can use to help you with controlling the cost. Okay, so that walks you through estimating that. And then this one here talks about the and value management. Okay, so this different concept. And then this shows you how to go about computing them, and there is a formula. So when you're taking that exam, like I mentioned before, they give you 15 minutes for you to gather your thoughts, your ideas, blah, blah, registration, and read the instructions, which usually takes less than 5 minutes. Then you have 10 minutes. My advice is don't rush into starting the exam. What you do during that time is what is called memory dump. Okay, so that booklet that you're given, usually I like to ask for a pencil when I'm taking an exam. Nowadays, they give you like an electronic eraser or a dry erase board. I like to ask for a pencil and a piece of paper so I can write down my formula, okay, or anything else that I think I might need for that exam. So do the memory dump. Anything that you have memorized, put it on a piece of paper down nicely, neatly if you have the time. Because by the time you start the exam, if you see a question, you look at your formula, you put in the values, and you get the answer, and you move on to the next part. You don't want to start thinking about the formula when you're right there with the exam. Okay, so and value management formulas will be very, very important. So all these videos here, they walk you through that, and also they help you to see how you can create an and value management graph. I think there's a graph like this in your notes, and we'll see that in a few minutes. So this helps you to see how you can create one. So these videos are actually very, very important. And what you can do is, in case you're planning on taking that exam, note where these videos are. And when you're preparing for the exam, maybe after this class, maybe 6 months after, you can always come back and watch them. So far, so good?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
so let's see how we can go about looking at the contents in this week. So I'm going to share this PowerPoint slide. And the PowerPoint slides talks about IT project, so don't worry about that. Application window, share that. And I think you have that. Okay, so hope you can see that. And make it a little bit bigger. So we have that. Now this is 41 slides. I'm not going to go through all the 41 slides, so the most important ones. And if you have any question, let me just know. Okay, so we have a few learning objectives there. And the key thing is we talk about IT project, but usually is most of the project. Most of the projects have a poor track record of meeting budget goals. Okay. I don't know how many of you are very good with money. I'm not a very good shopper. Anytime I go shopping, I buy things that I had not planned for. That's my weakness. So I kind of have like what is called cost overrun on my projects when I go shopping. So cost overrun, we're saying, is the additional percentage or dollar amount by which actual cost exceed what? Estimate. So I go to the store and I say I'm going to buy milk and eggs, and that's going to be less than what? Maybe $10, $11. That's my budget. By the time I leave there, $40 short. I've had what's called cost overrun. Okay. So there is this study from Harvard that says that there is a 27% reported cost overrun on most of the projects. Okay. And usually this project leads to what is called black swans. Now, why do we talk about black swan? What is a black swan? Anybody?
I have no idea.
Isn't it something that's odd in whatever group it's in?
Exactly. So usually we don't have, most of the swans are which color?
White.
Exactly. So it's very rare that you're gonna see a black swan. So, like, is that Anastasia or who said the who answered that? I didn't see who answered that.
I answered the white part.
Yeah, and the one who said the odd in a group, I want to give credit where it's due.
You can give credit to me if no one's going to respond.
Okay, you got it.
Oh, that was me.
Okay.
Oh,
Anastasia said the odd one.
Okay, got you. So that's the odd one. So black swans means something that is odd. So you have projects that are spending a lot of money. Usually what we call black swans, you also hear it being used with white elephants. Okay, or in politics, in Congress, the bridge to nowhere. Okay, there was actually a project in Alaska, I think, whereby they were spending a lot of money building this bridge that nobody used to use. So you hear that concept of the bridge to nowhere. Okay, so that is that. Cost overrun. And then we have some information. Oh, what did I do? Cost overrun. Undo that. So they give an example here of something that happened in Europe with a project that was taking a lot of money and they have to scrap it. So they did that in 2011. That happens usually in most of the countries and also most of the companies. Okay, so what is cost and project cost management? We have already mentioned what is a cost. You're saying is a resource sacrificed. So you might actually see that question in the CAPM or the PMP exam. They ask you what is a cost. It looks very simple, but they like to ask those kind of questions. A few of the definitions. Okay, so the project cost management, we are talking about including processes that are required to ensure the project is completed within an approved budget. So these are the different processes. Remember, we talked about the 5 process groups. So under the cost management, these are the processes. You don't have to cram this for now, but if you're taking the CAPM exam, not so much. The PMP exam, you need to know them. Okay? You need to know there is the cost management, the estimating cost, determining the budget, and then controlling. Okay, so controlling is very, very important because you want to make sure that the project is not going overboard. And you're saying this is one of the area where most of the projects have a problem. So that's very important. Determining the budget is also very important because if you are doing this project for a customer and you give them a lower budget, then you're going to be the one who is going to produce that deficit. So you want to make sure that you're very, very careful in determining the cost. Also, if you are going to be bidding for a project and you overestimate, you might lose the bid. If you underestimate, you might get the bid and then you're not able to finish the project. So determining the budget is very, very, very important. Okay, and that's going to come from what you're calling estimating. So you estimate the cost for all the work breakdown structure, and then that gives you the cost, and then you add the contingency. And we have 2 types of contingency. We have the contingency reserve, and then we have the management reserve. You add those 2, and you end up with the budget cost. Actually wrong. The contingency is part of the budget. Management reserve is not part of the budget. Project manager does not have control over the management reserve, so it's not part of the project budget. So they like to ask that question. You have to be careful about the contingency reserve and the management reserve. So the contingency is part of the budget. Management is not. And we'll see that in a few minutes. Okay, so that's part of the summary of how they are related. Under the planning, you plan the cost management, and then you have the output, you have the plan. And then the other process is you estimate the cost, and the output is activity cost estimates. Okay, so activity, what do you mean by activity? Those are things that you're going to be doing. If you're building the house, laying out the foundation, putting up the walls, ceiling, windows, that's part of the activity. And then you're going to have an estimate for those. How much is it going to cost you to put down the foundation? How much is it going to cost you to put up the walls? How much is it going to cost you for the windows? All of that. And then you have the basis of the estimate. So you have to document that. So how did you arrive at $10,000 for the foundation? Okay, so you're saying the foundation is going to require what? 6 people to dig the trenches, and then you're going to require this type of machines for this number of days. You're going to require these materials, these resources, all the way like that. And then how are you determining that? You're using an expert to help you do that. Okay, or maybe you're using experience from a prior project. If it's software development, the same thing. Okay, and then you have the project document update. So you're going to be updating documents. Very, very important. And then you determine the what? The budget. So determining the budget, you have the cost baseline. So this is the cost for the whole project at the beginning. Okay, and then funding. Where are you getting your money from? Okay, if the money is a loan from the bank, you're going to be using, you need to have that laid down. And then how are you going to be receiving this money from the bank? Are you going to get everything at the beginning? Are you going to be getting it at the end of the month? Is it going to be any interest? And on like that. And then, of course, you update your documents. Okay, so there's a lot of document updates, and that's why we said project managers, they spend 90% of their time communicating because you have to get all this information from all these different sources, and you have to communicate with them. You have to be doing a lot of updates. Monitoring and controlling. Okay, what do? You control the cost. And how do you do that? You have work performance information. So what work is being done. So a project is taking 12 months. At the end of the first month, how much have you done? You need to document that, and you're going to be using some tools to help you to find how much work has been done. Okay? That's what you call work performance information. And then you have cost forecast. Okay, so at the end of the second month, this is how much we have used. At the end of the third month, we expect to have used this. Fourth month, like that. Because when you have that cost forecast, then you'll be able to know how the funds need to come in, the cash flow. So if you're getting the money from the bank, you need to tell them, I need my money by this time because I need to be paying my employees, I need to be paying my vendors, all the way like that. If there are any changes that need to be done on project, you need to have that information. You're doing that under the monitoring and controlling process. Okay? And then if there are changes that are going to be made, that means we have to make some changes to the project management plan. We have to update that. And then we move on to project document updates, a lot of updates on the documents. And then if you have any process asset updates. So this is like, for instance, if you have employees who are working in one part of the project and they came from another department and they need to go back. So you release them and then you have to get other employees. That's what you mean by that. You have to communicate with your supervisors to let them, I'm going to require these employees on this date. And then you have to communicate with your supervisor to say, I'm done with that employee. You can assign them to another project, and on like that. So that is what you're going to be doing from the start to the end of the project. This is just a summary of the project cost management. Are we together?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see what's going on here. So some of the basic principles of cost management is most members of an executive board, they better understand and are more interested in financial terms. Remember the PowerPoint, the power of the points in there. Don't put too much information on your PowerPoint slide. So if you're working on a project and you have to present to the top management, they don't want to be bored with all the details. They want to see the value. Okay? So they want to see, we're working on this project, this is where the company is. When we finish this project, this is where the company is going to be. This is how much you're making now. When we finish, this is where we are going to be in after we finish the project in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and on like that. So that is why you see these values here, starting with the profit, money. Okay, top team, they want to know how is this project going to improve the bottom line. So profits, you know how to compute that, is revenue minus what? The expenditure. Profit margin is the ratio. This actually is not correct. Profit margin, we're saying, is the ratio of, it's correct in one way, but the way it's supposed to be, the right way to compute this is profit margin is equals to profit over the revenue. Okay, so they're saying is a ratio of revenue to profits, but it's supposed to be profit divided by the revenue. Okay, so you've heard about the margin, and I watch Shark Tank. I don't know how many of you do that. It's a very good show to watch if you're trying to be an entrepreneur, or if you just see how people invent things and solve day-to-day problems. So anytime somebody comes in there and they're doing a sales pitch, the sharks will ask them, tell me about your margins. Okay, so basically what they're interested in, they want to see what is the profit based on your revenue. Because if this value is usually represented as a ratio or as a percentage. So if profit margin is higher, like 80%, that's really good. Okay, never gets that high. Okay, so if you have some companies, 20% is good, some 40%. Okay, so if a higher value means that your profits are very high compared to your what? Your revenue. So note about that. Life cycle costing. When you're looking at this, basically what you're saying is you have to look at the cost of the project from the beginning to the end. Okay, so you consider the total cost of ownership or development plus cost, support cost for a project. Okay, so some of the project, you work on them, you finish, you give the customer, and you're done with it. Some of the projects you finish, you have to run it for some time, okay, before you can give it back to the customer. So you have to include that cost. If you are running, you're the one who is maintaining that project, you have to include that cost in your budget. So that's what you mean by the life cycle costing. That's why you see, like for the software development, when Microsoft sells you software, they include the updates, the cost for all the updates. Okay, and if it's a license, they have to include all the cost. If something happens to the software, they have to maintain it, and on like that. Cash flow analysis, you do this to determine the estimated annual cost and the benefits for a project, and also the resulting annual cash flow. So how much is money is going to be coming in from this project? You include that. And this is also important for you because you're going to include this to be able to know how much money you're going to need as you move on in your project. So that is that. And then we have this concept of what you're calling the return on investment, which I think we looked at before when you're trying to determine how to make a project. And we have what you're calling the benefit measurement process. So only 20% of organizations report having a high level of benefits realization maturity. So basically what you're saying is you have mechanisms in the organization that you can use to help you determine the value of your projects and how valuable those projects are. Okay? So most of the high performing organizations, they have a high benefits realization maturity compared with only 9% of companies that are not doing very well. So basically what you're saying, it is very important for your company to know how you compute or determine the benefits projects to your organization. So a few of the examples here, we're talking about Dell and how they try to implement a project that's going to help them to be more green or environmentally friendly, reducing what's called e-waste. So this is a concept that you should come across in CIS. What is that? Management Information Systems. If you take that class, or if you took it at the undergraduate level, they should have gone through something called e-waste, electronic waste, and most of the companies are doing that. If you go to Best Buy, you should have like a box on the entrance where you can put batteries or you can put old phones and things like that. That's a part of what you're calling the e-waste, instead of putting those things in the landfills. Okay, types of cost. We went through this already. Tangible, intangible, direct, sunk cost. Don't have to repeat that. Now, learning curve theory. So this is an important concept. Now, you are master students. Most of you, after this, you'll go to work. Some of you might decide to go to graduate school. So you'll be dealing a lot with what is called theory. On the streets, when you're walking on the street, or for a pedestrian, a theory is just a statement. Okay, and you might have heard some people saying, "Oh, this is just theory." Okay, so meaning there's no practice. But in academia, when you talk about theory, it's actually a statement that has been proven true based on data. Okay, so theory, a statement that has been proven, or hypothesis that has been proven to be true based on data. So you come up with a statement and then you collect some data and you test and you see whether that statement makes sense. So we have this concept that's called the learning curve theory. Okay? So LeBron James, if you listen to LeBron James, he just won another championship. He'll tell you for him to make that fade, he has tried very many fades. It's not something that just comes up one night. For every maybe 10 fades that he makes, maybe he has another 100 that he has failed to make, or he has another 100 that he has practiced on how to do it. So that is concept of what is the concept of what we're calling the learning curve theory. So this theory, so somebody actually collected some data, and what they realized is that when you have many items that are being produced repetitively, the unit cost of those items decreases. So basically what you're saying is as you produce more items, you get better at what you're doing. And then because you're getting better, that lowers the production cost. And that's basically what we mean by the learning curve theory. And there are very many other theories that you're going to come across or you have come across, okay, in your life. When you talk about human resource management down the road, we'll be talking about theory X and theory Y. And theory X and theory Y is part of what you're calling motivation theory. And what we mean is that there are some employees who have to be supervised. They cannot do any work unless they are supervised. If they're not supervised, they stop working. And then that's theory X. Then theory Y, employees don't need to be supervised. Okay, there's some employees who don't need to be supervised. Now, usually, if you have lower tiered jobs, those are the employees that need supervision. If you got like a fast food restaurant, most of those employees there have to be supervised. If nobody's supervising them, they might not be doing the actual job. If you got the high tier job, top level management, you don't need a lot of supervision. Okay, because usually those people are intrinsically motivated to do what they're doing. They do that because of fun and on, because they like what they're doing and on like that. It does not mean that they're not people who like what they're doing at a fast food restaurant, and does not mean that all the employees have to be supervised. But some, or a significant number of them, need somebody to be watching them. Any questions?
Yes, sir. Not right now.
Okay, so reserves. We talked about the reserves. Donors including a cost estimate to mitigate cost risk. We'll look at the risk management and we'll revisit this again. So we usually have two types of reserves. We have the contingency reserve, and usually when you see the contingency reserve, you'll also see what's called the known unknown. Unknown is a risk, okay? And then is known, like I'm saying, known unknown. We know their risk, they are there, but we don't know exactly what they are or when they are going to occur. So like a hurricane, we know this place, you can have a tornado. There is a season when the tornadoes come, but it's not guaranteed it's going to be on a specific day. So if you are in construction and you're putting up a house, you need to have some contingency reserve, some money that will be used in case there's a tornado. Management reserve allows for future situations that are unpredictable. So this is what's called unknown unknown. Usually, the project manager has control over the contingency reserve because this is part of the budget. Management reserve is money that the management has control over. So for every project, the management can set aside some money on the side, and that's not part of the budget. So this is the money that you can maybe ask for if maybe an employee, something happens on the project and you need to make some amends. So you can talk with the management and they can give you some money to plug that. So management reserve is not part of the budget, and the project manager has no control over this. So you might see a question like that in the exam. Now, we are not just studying for the exam, but also for the general knowledge. Now, unfortunately, in life, exams leads to certificates, and certificates is what people use to show that you know what you're talking about. That's why we have a driving license. If you don't have you might be a NASCAR driver. If you don't have a driving license, you might get into trouble, unless, of course, your face is known around. Okay, so what's going on here? Cost management. So these are some of the concepts that you can use for the cost management. So the level of accuracy and units of measure, you have to specify that. The procedures that you're using in the organization, control threshold, rules of performance measurement. So how do you measure performance? Okay, so if it's programming, 8 hours of working, code writing, something like that. Which formats are you using to report? Are you using Microsoft Word documents? And how often do you do that? And on like that. So these are things that you can read. Estimating cost. Okay, we can do that. And how do we do that? So in terms of estimating the cost, we have these three levels that we use to help us in estimating cost. One is what is called the rough order of magnitude. So anytime that you're working on a project, you have what you're calling a rough order of magnitude. Somebody give me a ballpark figure. That's what we mean. Okay. So very early in the project life cycle, and often this is usually 3 to 5 years before the project completion. So the rough order of magnitude, and then when is it done, provides estimate of cost for selection. Okay, so because what is going to happen is if you're building a house, before you start, you can say this house is going to cost me $400,000. Okay? But when you start building, there might be a hurricane somewhere, and what happens? A lot of houses are destroyed, so we have to rebuild. The price timber goes up, you have to adjust your budget. Okay, so rough order of magnitude is usually very early in the project, and usually you can be off by almost 50% or even 100%, either lower or higher on both sides. So in the exam again, they like to ask you rough order of magnitude, and then you might see like they give you the different levels of accuracy. Budgetary is early, 1 to 2 years out, and usually is negative 10 to 25%. And then you have definitive. So this is when you're already in the project. So have an idea at least about those types of estimates that you can have. Okay, so different types of estimation. And we have something about the engineering there. And estimates are usually done at various stages of a project and should become more accurate as time progresses. Okay? So a large percentage of total costs are usually labor costs, how much you're paying them to do the work. So note about that. Maximum full-time employee, by department, by year. So that's just an example to show, like, for different companies, their employees and how many they have. How many do you need? So in this project, you're going to need 24 people from CIS, 3 from marketing, 12 from reservations, 2 contractors, for a total of 41. And then you can see as you progress, some people will drop off, others will come up. Okay, like in the reservation, by the end, you only have few. The same thing with the information system. In year 5, you have fewer employees. Contractors, by year 4 and 5, you're done with them. So you'll have something like this to help you in determining the cost for your project. So how do you determine the cost of your project? So we should be done in the next 15 minutes or so. We used these tools before when you're looking at the time, and we said you can use analogous or top-down. So analogy is based on something that you have done before. Or top-down, so use the actual cost previous similar project as the basis for what? Estimating the cost of the current project. If you're in the construction industry, you might have an idea about how much timber costs, how many people need to lay a foundation, put up windows, paint, and on like that. If you're in programming, you might have an idea about how much you have to pay somebody to program in Java, and on like that. Bottom up, the same concept. You use the individual work items, which you're getting from the work breakdown structure. And then you have parametric modeling, whereby you're using the project characteristics, and then you're using mathematical modeling. So in the exam, they like to give you different techniques, and they can give you a list, and they ask you which of this does not belong. Now, if you're working on a project and you're not the project manager, they might have used any of this or a combination of these to determine the cost of the project. So if you have somebody who is working in a project, try to ask them what cost estimation tools and techniques do they use, okay, in the organization in determining the cost of the project. Okay, so some of the typical problem with IT cost or any project cost is estimates are done too quickly. Okay, so people rush. Okay, so you do the cost during what you're calling the analysis, and you have to make sure that at least you don't fall into what's called the paralysis analysis. People lack estimating experience. If you don't have the experience, then you might be using the wrong information. So that's why you might have to bring the expert. So when you're doing the estimating, you bring the expert, people who are familiar with the cost and the field that you're working on. So if you're trying to determine how long or the cost of developing a software program, you might need a software developer who can tell you how many lines of code somebody can write and then how much they are paid. Okay, because we said project manager, you don't have to know everything. Your work is to bring all the resources from everybody else. Human beings are biased towards underestimation. Okay, like we said, even with this class, we said we're going to be finished by whatever time, and then you see sometimes we go over time. So sometimes human beings have a problem with estimating, underestimation, overestimation. And then sometimes management desires accuracy. So you might have some pressure from management, and that sometimes can lead to some issues. Okay, so we have some examples here of how you can come up with a cost. So we have this project, and from the work breakdown structure items, remember the work activity items, we have five main areas: the project management, and then we have hardware, we have software, and then testing. And basically what you're doing here is we are developing some software. So we determine the project manager is going to require 960 hours, and you're going to be paying them $100. So for the cost of $96,000 for the duration of the project. And then the project team members, they're going to require 1920 hours for this project, and you're going to pay them 75 for this cost. Then contractors, 10% of software development and testing, and you're going to pay them this much. So part one of the work breakdown structure is going to cost us $306. So you add this and this and this to end up with that. Okay, hardware, we have some devices, because what you're doing is you're developing software and you're going to put that software on the devices. It's going to cost 100 unit hours. For 600, you get that. Servers, some computers that are going to be storing the main software. You need 4 at that cost, like that cost is that. So you do the same thing all the way down like that. And then you come up to number 6 is the reserves. Remember the contingency reserves? So for this company, the policy is you have 20%. It might be different for different companies. 20%. of the cost, and is that you add up everything, you end up with this is the project cost estimate. Okay, so you can compute the percentages, and just by looking at this, you can see that the software is taking the biggest chunk of the budget cost, followed by the project management, and then you have training and reserves, and on like that. So this is for the whole project. Then you can break this down. This is another example of a different type of project. Now this is to show you how you actually ended up with the labor. So we're talking about the labor for testing and developing the software. So coding, how to write the code. So we have some information here. We have the function point estimate, and basically this is based on information that is out there, that it takes somebody this long to write 100 lines of code, and if it's Java, they get paid this much. So that is also how, like Cisco, they determine how much they're going to be paying their employees, okay, programmers. So we are saying that external input, we have 10, conversion factor is 4, we got 40, and you're multiplying that by 4, and then and on like that. So you don't have to worry about all this, but just understand that there is a method that you can use to help you determine how you're going to pay somebody to program or to write a certain line of code. And that is what we use to help us in determining the budget. Okay, so that is that. Then you can break this down. So they talk about the user stories. Read a little bit about that. It's very important. Determining the budget cost baseline is very important. So once you do that, then you can come up with this breakdown here, which actually shows you the budget, but for the whole duration of the project. Okay? So you can see that based on the work breakdown structure items, project management, project manager is going to be paid 8,000 every month for 12 months. That's how they are getting up 96. And then the members for the first month, you pay them 12,000 all the way like that. Contractors, we don't start paying contractors until the second month. Okay, and that's how much we are. And then hardware, we're only going to start spending on hardware on the 4th month, and then the 5th month. Servers the same way. License software like that. Trainee cost, we don't need that money until the 9th month. Okay, because we need to develop the software, install it on the computers, and then we can start training the employees. Okay. So this kind of gives you like a breakdown. Now, if you're getting the money for funding this from the bank, you can present this to the bank, and then the bank will tell you, okay, this is how much you're going to be sending you. By the end of the first month, that's how much they're going to give you. Second month, like that. Third month, and on like that. So now you have the budget, and then you break it down like that, and you can see what you're calling the cost baseline. Are we together?
Yes.
Okay, now you can see the relationship between the cost and the time. Okay, the cost and the time, because we have 20,000 for month 1, 86 for the second month, and on like that, because this is going to be very important if you understand this relationship when we come to the earned value management, the concept where we are going to be computing those values that help us to see whether our project is over the budget or is delayed or we are doing work too fast. Okay, so we need to have values for the duration and also for the cost. So that's very, very important. And that leads us to project control. Okay, so project control, we're talking about monitoring the cost performance, and you want to ensure appropriate project changes are included in a revised cost baseline. So if you make some changes, you have to go back and include that in your cost baseline. And then you inform the project managers. So, earned value management, very important. It's a project performance measurement technique that integrates scope, time, and cost. We have the scope because this is what we are going to be doing. Okay, we have all things that you're working on here, and then we have our budget, and then we have our what? Our duration or the cost. So the scope shows what you're doing. We have the month that shows the schedule, and then we have the budget right here. So now we can use this concept of earned value management. So we are given a baseline, original plan plus approved changes. You can determine how well the project is meeting its goal. And we use that by using the earned value management. So few items here, a few definitions. So understand what you're calling the planned value. Now, sometimes in some of the books, they call it budgeted cost of work scheduled, big letters, big words. Don't worry about that. But basically what you're saying is this is also called the budget. So planned value is also called the budget and is nothing else but is the portion of the approved cost estimate planned to be spent on an activity during a given period. So right here, this is what we have planned. 20,000, that's the planned value for whatever we are doing on this project. By the end of second month, that's the planned value. Add planned value because that's the budget of what we have planned to do. Now, another concept that we have to be familiar with is the actual cost, formerly called the actual cost of work performed. Is the total of the direct and indirect cost incurred in accomplishing an activity during a given period. Okay? So, actual cost at the end of the second month, how much have we spent? Okay? So, we might have spent, maybe we plan to spend 20,000, but you have only spent 15,000. Okay? So, that is the actual cost. How much have we actually spent? We plan to spend 20,000, but only spend 15,000. That is the actual cost. Now, the earned value, they give you that big word, budgeted cost of work performed, is an estimate of the value of the physical work actually completed. So remember, we planned to spend 20,000. We have actually spent 15,000, which is the actual cost. Now, the earned value is what is the value of the work that we have actually done. Okay, so this earned value, we are going to compute it based on a rate. So there is a rate that you're going to be given that determines how fast you're completing the project. And what you want to do is, in an ideal situation, you want to make sure that your earned value is the same as the actual cost. Okay, so earned value is based on the original planned cost for the project or activity and the rate. So this is very important, the rate at which the team is completing the work on the project activity. So you'll be given all these values. All what you need to do is to remember the formulas if you're doing it in the exam. In an actual project, if you have the software, it actually helps you to compute these values. When you enter all the information in your Microsoft Excel and you have all the cost and all the activities and the relationship, by one strike of a button, it can compute for you all these values and help you to be able to see whether your project is working or moving properly. Rate of performance, the ratio of actual work completed, the percentage of work planned, and on like that. So we have an example here, and they talk about 50%. That is the rate of performance, and on like that. So before we even look at these values here, you have this example here. So and value. So what I want you to do is at the end of this class, when you have relaxed a little bit, take these values, these formulas here, and value you're saying is planned value to date times the rate of performance. Okay? Rate of performance. So you're given and value here, planned value, actual cost, cost variance. These have already been computed for you, but they are computed based on this example here. I think they're getting the exercise from your book. So the formula that you need to know is the and value, cost variance, which is equals to and value minus the actual cost. Schedule variance is and value minus performance value, all the way down like that. Okay, so at least have an understanding of this formula. This is part of what you'll do as the memory dump when you're taking that exam. If you take that exam, if you go for an interview, at least have an idea about what this is. Okay, so rules of thumb: negative numbers for costs and schedule variance indicate problems in those areas. So when you compute your values, okay, the schedule variance and the cost variance, if these numbers are negative, then it means there's a problem with your project. Okay, because it means that and value is lower than the actual cost. So you're spending more than the value that you're getting from that expense. Okay, the same thing. You're way ahead of time, and the value that you're getting from that is lower. Okay, so the schedule. So it means that you're way behind because based on the performance of your project. So negative value. So the most important thing is know how to use the formula and also interpret the result, because sometimes they'll give you the results and they ask you to interpret the results. CPI and SPI less than 100% indicate problems. So these values are actually percentages. See this CPI, cost performance index, is and value over actual value. So if this value is less than, if this value is less than 100, it means that actual cost is greater than the and value. The same thing here. So what you're going to find is that if your cost variance is negative, your CPI is going to be less than 100. Okay, and the same thing with the CPI. If your schedule variance is negative, your schedule performance index is going to be less than 100. So that means there is a problem with your project. So that's what you need to at least have an idea about how to do that. Okay, so estimate to completion. Once you have worked with your CPI, you can actually generate this graph that can help you to be able to see at a certain month how much money do you need to complete the project. So this and value management chart here is showing you the relationship between cost of the project and the duration. And you can generate this based on this graph over here. I'm sorry to go backward. I know I said it should be done in the next 15 minutes. I don't think we'll be able to do that. So give me maybe 5-10 more minutes. We should be done. So when you have this graph, I'm trying to see where that graph was. See this graph here? You have the 12 months all the way, and then you have this budget, like these values here. So when you have this as the x-axis, and then you have these values, you have this as x-axis, and this is the y-axis, dependent variable, and that gives us this. X-axis is the independent variable. That chart here, okay? So time goes, irrespective of what happens with money. Time has to go, okay? So that's why it's independent. So you have the month here, and then you have the money, and if you plot all the way, you can come up with this line over here. Okay? So this line is representing the budget because you already know the budget, and then you start performing the project. So remember, we talked about the update that you're doing on the project. You're going to be updating. So after the first month, you see that's how much you have spent. Second month, and then at the fifth month, if you take a snapshot, you'll see that the actual cost is right here. Okay. So the actual cost is right here, and this is how it has reached there. This is actual cost. This is the planned budget or the budgeted cost. Okay. Then from here, you'll be able to compute the and value and the cost variance and the schedule variance and the cost performance index all the way like that. Okay. So you can compute that based on that. And then based on your cost performance index, you can actually determine what's going to be the estimate at completion. Okay? So just by looking at this project, if nothing changes and they continue the way they are doing, they are going to require a little bit more time because this is more than 13 months, 12 months, I'm sorry, and it's going to be over $120,000, okay, for this project, okay, which was planned to be completed in 12 months and take $100,000. So these are some of the tools that you can use to help you to make an adjustment to your project. So in this case, you might have to do what's called the crashing, okay, where you try to combine some activities so that you can cut on the cost. Sometimes you talk with the customer and they tell you, we don't care about the schedule, but make sure that you stay within the budget. Or they tell you, stay within the budget and you can extend the schedule. So there might be some of those conversations with your project manager, or with your customer, I'm sorry. Okay, so that is what's going on, a little bit issues on the global issues and what's going on. That is that. Project portfolio management. So most of the companies are doing that. Manage projects as a group. That's what you're calling project portfolio management. And some of the benefits of that is reduced redundant projects and coordinated those that overlap. So most of the companies, if you're developing software, you might have software that have different components like Microsoft. They develop Microsoft Word, Excel, Access. If you look at the interface for Microsoft Word, Excel, you find that the ribbon is almost very similar. They share some concept. So if they manage those projects as a portfolio, they are going to be able to reduce the redundant in the project, and they can have the same people doing the same project, and that way they are able to also hone their skills and have more development skills. Okay, so some of the software that you can use to help you with cost management is Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Project. You can use Excel also sometimes to help you with that, and even sometimes Microsoft Word. So that is where we are. Okay, unless there's a question, we're going to stop there. And I'm going to post these on Blackboard. Any questions?
I do not have any right now.
Okay, so the key takeaway is watch those videos online. Make sure you understand these formulas. And the videos actually go into more details about how to compute these values. And they give you some practical examples and good demonstrations. So go through them. In case you have any issues, let me know and we can plan how to go about it. I'm going to stop recording just in case somebody has